So welcome everybody. I want to welcome you to another alumni video session that I'm going to do. And this one's a little bit different because I usually work with people with chronic pain. And I want to introduce you to Marcus Hemsley, and he has been suffering with long COVID. And I thought it'd be really interesting for you to listen to what happened to him and how he's doing now, which is amazing. So Marcus, please say hello and introduce yourself.
Hello, yeah, so I'm Marcus Hemsley. I run a marketing agency in the UK and North America. And in 2020, I came down with COVID, decided to keep working through it because I wasn't sure if it was COVID, and ended up in bed for 5 weeks and then never fully recovering. And that was just over 2 years ago. So yeah, it's been quite the journey.
Right, and I remember when we first met, you told me this incredible story about calling the paramedics and you couldn't breathe. What did they tell you?
Oh, that was terrifying, yeah. So it was, I mean, most people remember 2020, when we all found out about this virus and people started coming down with it, and it was like a horror film, to be honest. And I wasn't certain I had COVID because initially I had sort of sore throat, a bit of a light cough. I wasn't sure if it was seasonal stuff or whatever. But after I sort of kept pushing on with the business and working, I collapsed and had a big fever and was in bed, and I was like getting real shortness of breath. And that was terrifying because I thought, gosh, this is going to get worse. I have to go to hospital. What are my oxygen levels doing? So yeah, I rung 111, which put me through to the paramedics, and they sort of said, okay, well, you can just about speak because you're really panting, but can you get to a mirror? And I did. And they said, right, are your lips turning blue? And I said, no. They said, great. Well, we're not going to send anyone because we have thousands of people calling paramedics around the country with this. And given your age and everything, you're probably going to be okay, which isn't particularly what I wanted to hear. But, I had a moment of sort of looking out the window and thinking, when people say if you're sick, you should take it one day at a time. But in that instance, it's take it sort of 1 minute at a time, just try and get through the next minute. And that's when I thought, I'm more sick than I've ever been in my life, and this is pretty serious.
Right. So at what point did it turn from COVID into long COVID? How did you know that?
Well, that's the thing. Long COVID wasn't, it wasn't a term until about 6 months into not getting fully better from COVID. So I think after about 4 or 5 weeks, I kept having these first day backs in the business. Like, Marcus is coming back in the business, hooray. And I'd come in and, not physically in, but I'd join Zoom calls and whatever. And then after about 10, 15 minutes, just feel so sick, dizzy, out of it, tired. Like the COVID symptoms would keep coming back the more I was trying to do work. And after about 3 or 4 attempts, I just thought, that's it. And I sort of rang my doctors and they said, oh, you have something called post-viral fatigue. And I was like, oh, okay. What does that mean? They said, oh, well, with most viruses, there's a bit of fatigue and some lagging symptoms. It'll be sorted in sort of 2 to 4 weeks. Oh, great. And obviously 2 to 4 weeks passed and kept passing. And after about 4 months, then I started reading news articles saying, oh, there's a number of people who haven't really recovered from COVID. And we're going to call it post-COVID syndrome. It's a new syndrome. And I was like, well, I don't want a new syndrome. And then a few months later, I think the media in the UK started calling it long COVID. I think in America, they call it long hauler COVID. But either way, it's become a different illness. The virus is dead, but the damage it's caused to what I understand is the immune system is it's sort of an autoimmune disease. It keeps attacking parts of your body and giving you symptoms every day, which isn't particularly fun.
So how did it affect your daily life, like with your family and like, were you able to go out? Were you able to do anything?
No, it was, I mean, that was really tough because, I used to exercise daily. We've got in our garage, we've turned it into a little gym. I live out in the countryside, so I used to go for walks. And I mean, I tried to get out and do stuff. And then it would end up me having what I called a COVID flare up, an attack of all these symptoms, and I'll be in bed for 2 days. So I sort of learned quite quickly that I couldn't do much. And it was really tough because my other half, she was left running the business. We have at the time, he was a 6-year-old autistic son who had additional needs. So it was a real challenge. And there was this course, my other half has worked with you as well, Hannah. We had this horrible moment where she fell down the stairs. I was in bed feeling horrendous, heard this crash and the scream, and she put her back out. She couldn't walk.
Wow.
And I sort of hobbled down the stairs, and my son was crying. And it was this moment where I was like, wow, like, I can't breathe and have no energy. You can't walk. No one can come in because we're still in lockdown, right? So it wasn't like we could just call friends to come round, So it was pretty tough, But again, you just try and get through it each day as you can, and hope that it solves itself quicker than it actually did. But it's the hope that tries to carry you through, I think.
Right. Sounds miserable. So how did you find me?
Right. So that was so I wanted a series of, I guess, so also I wanted to try and solve this. I went to a series of different sort of specialists in different areas. I went to an occupational therapist initially to help, and she taught me to pace myself, which was useful. She sort of gave me an insight as well that, she'd been working with people with post-viral fatigue for 20 years. And said all of them were the same. They're all sort of what they call A personality types, I think perfectionists that you would call them, Hannah. So people are always pushing and striving. And her hypothesis is that they're all on the edge of burnout anyway. And I've noticed that actually, like a lot of people who I know who have long COVID are all very driven career people. I think we had this conversation as well. We said it correlates with chronic pain. A lot of them tend to be in their late 30s and 40s. So they have children, they're at the peak of their career, they're aging parents, they've got lots of demands on their life, lots of stressors. And that, chronic things seem to happen because they're put in that state quite a lot. So that, that was useful. And I did a bit of physiotherapy as well, which was useful just to slowly get me back into exercise. I then worked with this doctor, who did DNA tests and blood tests and really got on top of the diet and put me on a low histamine diet, and that started solving it. But she said, one of the missing pieces of the puzzle is the psychology side of it, of the stressors. And I kind of knew that intuitively, Hannah, because I part of the work with the occupational therapist was writing down all the things that set off the symptoms. And actually the list would be rushing around, getting stressed, lots of screen times, negative emotions. So all the sort of cortisol sort of fueled things that seemed to set it off that was interesting. So I started working with a chap called Dr. Alan Watkins, and he did a heart test on me. So see how much I was in fight or flight. So I had a heart rate monitor. And again, he came back with the same conclusion, which was like, your heart rate variability is good, but you're in chaos a lot. You're not in coherence much. You're not resting in sort of DHEA and in a more sort of settled down space. You're really chaotic. And I was like, right. So then I started reading books to try and solve this final piece of the puzzle. Because I was like, I'm getting all the rest of it right. Okay, I'm pacing externally, like I'm spreading out my day. My diet's good. I'm sleeping. I'm doing light exercise. I'm working with Dr. Alan Watkins for the business leadership stuff and biology of leadership. So I was making sure when I got back into the business, but there was still that piece missing of that sort of really slowing down. And I think I came across your book through another book because I read a book and they referenced yours. So I bought it right away because the story in, is it Joe Bailey's book, Thriving in the Eye of the Hurricane? And that story, your story was just amazing. So I bought your book and I didn't realize it was a novel at first, and then it was really well written as well, and it grabbed me from the first bit. I just had a few insights. I think there's that moment where I realized that I think that the character in the book, Deborah, talks about that so much sort of stress and anxiety is just speeded up thinking. That's it. I have an inner speed, so I'm pacing myself externally, right? But I'm not pacing myself internally. So that was huge for me. So I started, a few other things in that book gave me insights that I started playing with for a few weeks, and it really started helping actually, because even though like some of the symptoms can be caused by the high histamine diet and, rushing around externally, I would say where I was last year, so much of it was caused by the inner speed, the psychological, the taking my bad thinking seriously and then getting caught in negative feedback loops that really ramped it up. So to answer your question, I found you through, like, you're the last piece of the puzzle, to be honest. And I think that's when I sort of reached out to you and said, hey, let's have a
Right.
session, talk,
Yeah.
because your book's really, really helping me. And that's when we started engaging.
Yeah, and that's something I've found with a lot of people I work with is that you can sometimes handle the pain or get a diet, like you said, exercise, medical stuff. But if my thinking is still going 100 miles an hour, frightened and worried about is it going to get worse? How bad is it going to be today? Can I get through this assignment? Like pick my kids up. That can often exacerbate it. Like you were saying, those are things that, like the doctor was saying, triggers it. And how when that slows down, is such a benefit for your health as well, to your body gets a chance to relax and then repair itself, right?
I think that's it. And I hadn't realized, I think working with you and doing your sort of WhatsApp service and sort of daily WhatsApps really helped, sort of a real-time intervention to help me realize how much I'm sitting there and working myself up. So I'm sitting there, and I think you had a great thing you said to me of like, like stay in today, like stay in Tuesday morning. Don't don't like live in the future. You're not a time lord like Doctor Who. And it's true. I'll be projecting to, I've got this meeting tomorrow, and that person winds me up, and I'll say this to them and whatever. And all of a sudden, I'm sort of getting, to fight or flight, getting a bit wound up. Cortisol's being released, and all of a sudden, I'm starting to feel a bit long COVID-y, that's the COVID-y, as I call it. Which
you invented a word, COVID-y.
I did, well, yeah, and you point out that isn't actually, but it's true. COVID is the term I use for just having these long COVID symptoms that appear, but it's so true, because I think working with you, one of the other things, I remember I got in touch with you because I was like, right, I'm going back to the office now. I'm feeling well enough, but I'm really worried about the driving because I haven't driven for 6 months, and I'm worried about getting a flare up and all the rest of it. And you said something that I didn't understand initially. You said, don't put anything on it. And I was like, what do you mean? Don't put anything on it? So what would happen if you just turned up and drove and just was in the moment? And I kind of got it. And I think I told you the story that I didn't even message you that morning saying, oh, I'm driving for the first time in 6 months. I was like, well, let's pick a good soundtrack. I picked the Reservoir Dogs soundtrack, and it was a sunny day, put my sunglasses on and just drove in. Right. And that day I was able just to relax and just enjoy the moment, be present. And I had back-to-back meetings, drove home, and I was enjoying the day so much I forgot about long COVID and feeling COVID. And that was really big for me.
Yeah, I think that's so important when you see state of mind, or like the mood that we're in can make such a difference. Even if you are in pain or are suffering, that being in a better mood is going to change everything. Yeah. So that's a really great example. So I remember when we first met, you hadn't been outside very much, you hadn't driven, you hadn't been able to take your kid out, pick him up from school. So how is it now? What is it like today?
So today, I am taking him to school and back, which is good because he goes to a school that's sort of half an hour drive. So my other half is very happy that I'm doing part of the school run. Back at the office, I'm still pacing myself, but like this week I've been doing more exercise than I've done for a while, like slowly building it up, going for walks. So yeah, I'm back out in the world. I think I've said it to people in recent weeks. I feel like a man released from prison. 2 years of being in my house and just not feeling well enough to go anywhere. And now I'm starting to do stuff. And, I went to a party for the first time on Saturday night in 2 years, which was mad. And, it was a little bit more exhausting than, parties used to be for me, but it's all sort of moving in the right direction. It's baby steps. And I think the truth is when I was really sick, I worried that I might never be able to do it again. So, and I think that's where a lot of people with long COVID, they get that fear that they're stuck in that. And I imagine you see the same, Hannah, with your chronic pain patients, that will I always feel in this place? Yeah. I can't get back out. So I'm so happy that I am.
Yeah. So is there anything else that you think would be important for people who are, where you were a few months ago? What do you think would be most helpful?
I think certainly just engaging with, the sort of the stuff that you talk about with the 3 principles. I think everyone misses that. I'm going to put you in touch with someone who is setting up it's like a Fitbit for people with long COVID and chronic fatigue. And I had a call with him actually. A VC put us in touch, and I sent him your book as well, because I said, look, what the Fitbit thing does for people with long COVID chronic fatigue is it helps them pace externally. helps them sort of like not waste all their energy first thing in the morning so they're feeling exhausted later on. But what he misses, and I said this to him, is you do realize we have an inner speed as well. It's like, and I think that's what your book really points to, is that there's an inner speed, and actually in some ways that's almost as if not more important than the external speed.
Yeah.
Because I can be sitting here, but I could be really working myself up, having lots of stressful thoughts and worried thoughts and projecting into the future and all the rest of it. Whereas actually, if I realize that those are just thoughts and I can settle back down into the default space, then actually I'm okay. And that's sort of, so I think I'd encourage people to explore that side of it, because I think a lot of the help that is out there for us with long COVID starts on the external. And that's not a bad place to start, right? Like it is the psychological, Dr. Watkins pointed that out, you've pointed that out. And I think there's, there's more people are starting to see that, I think the doctors I was working with started pointing that direction, saying you've ticked those boxes, well done, Marcus, but you're never going to get back unless you slow down internally. And if your hypothesis about perfectionists is correct, and from what I've seen it is, because I know lots of people with long COVID and chronic fatigue and chronic illnesses, it's slightly harder for us as perfectionists because we want to keep doing stuff and pushing and striving and, get up and grind. But actually we need to realize that we can still achieve all the things we want to from a beautiful place, and we don't have to be stressed. Yeah,
that's great. Well, that was really nice, because it's been so great for me to watch you, come out of that prison, like you said, and when you sent me messages saying, I'm at office for the first time, or you ate out a meal for the first time, it was really wonderful to see that. So thank you so much for sharing your experience with us, and I wish you all the best. And I'm kind of just excited to see where it goes next. Now you're out of the prison, what's going to happen next. So thank you so much for spending time with us. Thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me, and I hope people who listen will find it helpful.